In this video, we're going to be multi-track recording using tracks live from Waves on our RPM Dynamics MS-48 and TB-72R. Just so you know, you don't have to use just tracks live. There's other programs out there that you can use as well. In another video, I went over the procedure on how to set up the MS-48 as well as the TB-72R. So if you haven't done that already, I would suggest you watch that video before watching this one. Now let's head over to the console and set up our session. Here on the right side, as you remember, I have my MS-48 connected using the external KVM switch number 1 on the console, which will allow me to use the trackball as well as the mouse to control the Mac Mini. Okay, now that we're at the console and I have my KVM engaged, I'm going to head down and click on the Tracks Live icon to go ahead and boot the program. As you see here, we have our session window. We have the ability to start on a new session, open a template, or open a save session. We also have the ability to go into the system settings. But I want to go over a few things here before we create the new session. If we notice, our audio interface is set to the ProX recording. This is the aggregate device that I've created when setting up my RPM Dynamics interfaces. The sample rate for the recording is already set to 96K. So to go ahead and create the new session, let's click on New Session. Here, for this session, I'm going to go ahead and click on my backup drive and name the session in here. For this, I'm going to call it Midas Recordings. And then hit save. Now that our session window is up, we see that it automatically went ahead and created 120 tracks. The reason for this is because we already created the aggregate device for the ProX to be the recording interface for 120 channels. So when Tracks Live boots and I have the ProX assigned as the recording interface, it's normally going to default to the full 120 channels of record capability. In this video, I will go ahead and record all 120 channels just to show you the power that this thing is capable of doing. Normally, when I'm recording a show, I'm capturing around 110 channels. Now, this might seem like a lot. As a studio guy, I like to multi-track each and every channel, as well as all of my effects returns, so this way, all of the Midas console effects that I'm actually using during the show, I can actually transfer over into the studio, and they don't need to add any additional effects, and the effects sound exactly the same as it was at the show. On top of that, I also like to print a copy of the left and right, so that way, in the event that I need a quick mix of the entire show, I can just go ahead and get those files and quickly be able to transfer that or present it to the band. Now that we have all 120 tracks, we're going to flip back over to the console and let's get everything patched into our AES-50 cards for our MS-48 and TB-72R to be able to actually get signal into Waves Tracks Live. So I'm going to switch out of my external KVM and head back to the console. For the demonstration of this recording, I went ahead and routed my iPod to all 120 channels on the console. Now we need to take all of our direct outputs and route them to our AES-50 cards. So let's head over to the patching screen. Now that we're in the patching screen, on the left-hand side, I have the direct outputs tab selected. On the right-hand side, for our destination, I have the stage I/O, where we have our 5 AES-50 cards, all labeled records 1 to 24, 25 to 48, 49 to 72, 73 to 96, and 97 to 120. As I demonstrated in other videos, we can quickly patch channels just by using the auto function. So let's go ahead and do that so we can speed through this. I'm going to select channels 1 all the way down to 120. And now I'm going to click on the first channel on the first AES-50 to assign 1 to 24. Next, 25 to 48, 49 to 72, 73 to 96, and finally 97 to 120. So now all of our direct inputs are patched into the MS-48 and the TB-72R and ready to go. Let's head over to the Preferences tab. In the Preference window, under the User tab, I'm going to go ahead and hit Unmute All Direct Outs. On the console, you're going to notice that all of the direct out mutes are now going to be unchecked. There we go. Now, I'm going to go ahead and set all the direct output gains to 0 dB. I suggest you do this, especially if you're going to be using virtual sound check. This way, all of the gains into the console are going to be at 0 dB going to your multi-track record. So when they come back to the console, the gains are exactly the same as the way they came in, and you're able to mix properly. So now all the gains are ready to go. So now that we've record armed all of our recording channels, let's go ahead and play the iPod to verify that we have signal and that we've set our direct outputs into the AES-50 for our multi-track recording correctly. As we see, we have signal now appearing on all 120 tracks of our multi-track recording. Now, I'm going to go ahead and stop the iPod. At this point, I would go ahead and name and color code all of the tracks within the session. But to save time for this video, I'm going to go ahead and just name and color code the first track only. To name the track, I just click on the track name where it's listed as track 1. For example, we can name the first channel Kick 1. Now that we have track 1 named, let's go ahead and right-click on the channel. As you see, we have an option to change the color. So let's click on that. Now you see the color palette is on the screen. This might look a little familiar to the Midas console, which makes our life easy that we can match the colors on the console with our channels in the multi-track recorder. Ironically, Kick 1 is already colored blue, which matches all of my drum channels on my console. But for the video, let's go ahead and just make this channel red. Now after I've named and color-coded all of my channels, if I'm going to be multi-track recording the same inputs out each and every night, like as if I would on tour, this would be a great time to go ahead and save a template file. A template file is going to make our lives easy for when we need to set up a new session for recording. We can easily recall all the settings for all the names and the colors and the patching. So this way we don't have to do it again. The great thing about the template files, if you may remember when we booted Waves Tracks live, we were presented not only with previous sessions that we had, but all of our template files are easily identifiable on the right side of the screen. So let's go ahead and make a template file. To save a template file, let's click on the File tab on the top, and we can head down to Save as a Template. Now we're presented with the Save window. I'm going to go ahead and click on the backup number 2 hard drive, and I'm going to create a folder for it. And I'm going to name these Templates. Now I'm going to save this as our show template. I will call it all 120 channels. And then we click Save. So now that our session is all set up, all of our tracks are named and colored, we're ready to start recording. So I'm going to go ahead and press the iPod and get signal flowing back into Waves Tracks Live. Again, this is where I like to just verify that we have signal on all the tracks that we have record enabled. And as you see, we do. So now that we're ready, we can go up here and hit the record button. Let's go ahead and do that and get some audio tracking. We could take note at the CPU and the hard drive usage. As you see, the CPU at only 19%, we're barely touching the CPU processing power of the computer. Same with the hard drive, 1 or 2% from time to time. I mean, we're barely scratching the surface, which is a great thing, which is going to ensure that we have a rock solid and steady recording platform. At this point, I would toggle back to viewing the console, so this way I have my metering and can function and worry about the show. The recording is going to be happening in the background, and it's not something that I need to worry about. From time to time, I'll go ahead and swap back in to make sure everything is recording and working smoothly, but I've never had a problem. So now, we're reaching the end of our performance. I'm going to go ahead and stop the iPod as if it was the end of the show. Personally, I always like to record a few extra minutes of lead out time, so that way, if this was going to be used for a DVD or any other live recording, it's great for the editor to have some extra time on the end, so this way he can make his edits appropriately. Now that we have that extra time, I'm going to go ahead and hit stop. Now that the recording is stopped, you'll notice that the playhead is snapped back to the beginning of the session. If this is the end of your day, this is not anything you need to be worried about. If you're going to be continue on with your recordings, say if the band is on a break, or if you're going to be changing over into a separate band, you're going to need to go ahead and fast forward the playhead so that it starts at the end of where you left off on your last recording. So let's click on that. So now we can hit record, and we're not going to write over our existing audio that we just captured from our first performance. So let's go ahead and do another recording. Again, all of our tracks are already armed for the recording, so we could just go ahead and simply hit the record button, and we're tracking again. So now we've reached the end of our last performance. I'm going to go ahead and hit stop on the iPod. As I mentioned before, I personally like to leave a few moments of lead out time for any editing that we might need. Okay, let's go ahead and hit stop now. Here, you'll see that the playhead once again has snapped back to the beginning of where we started our second recording. But since we're done for the day, this is not something I need to worry about. So now, we're going to go ahead and save the session. To save a session, we click up here on the top and we head down to hit save. Now the session has been saved. If we need to change the name of our existing file, we can go ahead and click Save As and rename it as accordingly. Here, I'm going to name this Midas Recording 2. And just like that, the session is saved. Now, let's export our session. To do that, let's click up on the top where it says File, scroll down to Export, and we have two options, a mixdown or a stem export. If we want to export all of the individual multi-track files, we're going to click stem export. If we were in stereo mode and we were actually mixing within the session, we can then choose the mixdown option. But because we're just multi-tracking, we're just going to go ahead and click the stem export. As you'll see here, we have our format options on the screen. We'll notice that we are going to export in WAV format. It also gives us the ability to do AIFF and CAF files. We have the ability to change the bit depth from 24-bit to 16-bit. For the sample rate, because we captured at 96, we can go ahead and up convert, which I wouldn't suggest, but we can go ahead and down convert. We also have dithering options, where we can either do none, triangular, rectangular, or shape noise. We also have the ability to normalize. Again, this is not something that I would recommend. Now, we have our location options of where we want to export our files to. Personally, I like to make a separate folder so this way I can keep all of my exported files in one separate folder for ease of locating. Next, we have the ability to name our session. Or if we click on the box to check session name, it's going to go ahead and add the name of our session automatically for us. We also have the ability to put a date and timestamp in, as well as making any revision notes. If we click on the timespan tab, we can see the range of the session, so this way we know exactly how long it is. We could also choose to show the times either in time code, minutes and seconds, or samples. So let's click over to minutes and seconds. As we see, we have about 4.5 minutes of recording time. Here in the Channels tab, we have the ability to select or unselect any channels that we might want to include or exclude from our export. Now, from here, we can either hit the export or go back to the file format page and export from here. So let's just do it from here. Here, we have the progress bar for our export. As you notice, it's not taking very long, considering we have 120 channels. However, our recording was only about 4.5 minutes. So the longer the recording and the higher channels, it's going to take a little bit longer, so just be patient. Now that the export is finished, let's go ahead and verify to make sure that we actually have all of our audio files from the export. So I'm going to tab back over to the Finder. I'm going to click on Backup To, because that's where we actually recorded everything to. Click on the Midas recording. Now keep in mind, because we did a Save As and then did the export, I need to go to that song. So I'm going to click on Midas Recording 2. As you'll see here, we have an Export tab. If we click on that, you'll notice that we have all of the audio files that we just exported. If you notice down on the bottom, it says 120 items. That lets us know that we did export all 120 tracks. If you click on any one of the tracks, the Finder is giving us the information not only for the name of the track, but when it was created, the duration, the sample rate, and the bit depth. So now we can verify that we have all of our multi-track recordings exported. So we can close out of this. We can head back over to Tracks Live. Again, just for safety, we can go ahead and hit Save, which is the shortcut of Apple S, or we can go up here to the File window and click Save. At this point, we can close out of Tracks Live. So we can bring the scroll down and hit Quit, and Tracks Live is going to close out, and we're done for the day. So we can switch back over to the console, and then we can shut the console down and go home.